Good afternoon, YUM students. We're excited to host the Professionals by Pathway Career Exploration event to help students connect their learning to career opportunities. And I am Ms. Petersen, Ms. P, and I'm excited to welcome my former student, Lee Stoll, with KOMO News, Channel 4 in Seattle, as our guest today. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone that we are being recorded so that future students can benefit from our speakers. We have 30 minutes to learn about this career field, the education that's needed to enter and grow within the industry, and what advice our speaker has for our students. We will be monitoring any questions. You'll notice you have a question button at the bottom. We'll be taking your questions. And let's get started. So our students can learn about various professions and how they can prepare for their future. Lee, tell us about your career field, like how you get started, growth opportunities, pay, whatever you want to share.
Okay, well, and first of all, I had mentioned we do have an adopted puppy with us. So if she jumps onto camera, if I say, take that out of your mouth, I'm not referring to anyone here. It's she's off sleeping to the side now. So she's operating very well as my co-pilot. So I've now been in this career for 20 years, which is hard to believe since graduating from college. And I started by going to Northwestern University. And I double majored in journalism and art history. And from there, I can't say enough about internships. I was an intern at Fox Sports for one summer, and that led to my first job in Chicago as an associate producer at Fox Sports. It was a lot of fun, but I thought, I'm a serious journalist and I want to come home to Seattle. So let's move on from here. I then took a job as an anchor, reporter, and producer, the glorified one-man band, in Kalispell, Montana, which was a wonderful place to be, working at NBC. And then I worked for CBS in Spokane as a reporter anchor, and then finally did make it home to Seattle, working at Cairo CBS for a couple of years, and then jumped ship and went across the street. And I'm now at KOMO as a morning anchor and reporter. And again, the internships are kind of the special part of it because I also was a college intern at KOMO for one summer. And Eric Johnson, our main anchor, was the person who I kind of interacted with the most because we had our schedules match up. I was running teleprompter, ripping scripts, answering phones. And then the first year I'm at KOMO, I got to anchor with him. So it's little intern has come full circle that she's sitting on the anchor desk with the big guy. So I feel like finally maybe I've made it. Someday it'll sink in that I've accomplished what I thought I would when I was in Ms. P's class myself, saying I'm going to be a journalist. I'm gonna work in Seattle, and finally I'm here.
Awesome. So I think you have some clips you want to share with us about what it's like to work in a newsroom?
So sorry we can't do this in person. And let me see if I can just flip over to this. I took a couple of videos around our newsroom, and hopefully this is still playing through. Okay, so I'm just going to play this. Hey, look. Okay, here I am on a billboard, and this is all of our personnel.
Oh, you didn't do screen share yet.
I didn't. Okay, let's go back to that. I had clicked that off. Okay, now I am trying to go back to, let's see if this will come up. Oh, now I'm in the woods. Okay, where did I go?
So bottom of the screen should be a green button. That's the one you want to start with.
Well, that has all disappeared for me. Let's see, where did Zoom go? Let me go back this way.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I have it up, and there it is. Okay. Yes. Okay. Got it. I work in technology, right? Yes, I do. Okay. Here we go. That's where I found it. Okay. So let me open this one now. So this is going into, I just wanted to show you briefly the backbone of what we do, that you see the set, and this is where all of the paddling happens fiercely under the water. This is our old technical area, this is where the director would be, the technical director, the producer, and then all of these monitors are all of the feeds we get from our national reporters, from all of our local reporters, live shot locations, anything we want video wise, all fed into here. And this is where they can control the audio. You see that big audio board down in the left-hand corner. This was the old way of doing it. And then they built us this really nice new technical area. This is our new control room because it's now even more advanced. We have 2 rows of seating. I'm just going to stop it here for a second. 2 rows of seating, all of these monitors. You can see the chiclets on there that mostly everything is automated. So even though you have a computer, most of what you are doing is you are clicking on your keyboard to control everything. And we still have the big board here with all of the screens. So the directors can see what's coming up, what's available, and what's live on television. And on the side here, they can see where the graphics are and how they pop up. Usually you have about 6 people who are sitting in here, again, controlling all of the visual and audio of any newscast. So if I can go back to, okay, so that's the control room. And then to go into the studio, this is across the hall. And this just shows you, this is the weather screen right here. This is why no one in weather wears green, because then they would be a floating head. This was right after the newscast, so it looks a little broken in, but this is the set itself, which we only got a couple of years ago. And it looks a little bit like this, you know, the Starship Enterprise to us, but it gives us a lot of ability to move around the newsroom. We have different monitors, screens, places we can stand. So the background always looks different and gives the show a lot more movement. And what you've probably seen us, here's a better photo of just the studio itself. You can see here are all the cameras that we have. There are about 4 or 5 that we can use for a newscast, just to move the anchors around. And you probably have seen the anchors holding what looks like we're ready to take your order from Dutch Brothers any day. We have these iPads that we have with all the information we need. All of our scripts always in caps. It's just an easier way to read. The full rundown is here of all of the stories we do. The blue is all of the commands that the director needs to know. And at any time we can scroll through this, we can change our scripts. It tells us who is supposed to be talking and what's going to be happening. For instance, Kelly, our morning anchor, would be reading this, but she knows there's video over her. So if she needs to scratch her forehead or adjust her mic or, you know, signal something, she can do that because she knows she's not on camera. This is where a sound bite is. And a lot of people wonder, well, if your show starts at 4:30 in the morning, that must mean you come in at what, 4 a.m. for hair and makeup? Not quite. Sorry, take some water. Take a look at the times here for just a second.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness. Oh my gosh.
That is the time when people are coming in to build this rundown. So if our show's at 4:30, the producer is usually in the night before at least 10 or 11 p.m. We're changing scripts at 1 o'clock in the morning. This is after the morning newscast, so some of them have been changed for our Good Morning America cut-ins. That's why you see some later times. But others say yesterday, because that's when they were written. So it's an 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour day, and you just have to backtrack from the newscast itself, and that tells you when people actually have been coming in to even start building it. And then one more room, this is downstairs. This is another feed area. Blake here controls all of our satellite dishes. So any video feed that we are getting that is then fed up to the control room also comes here. He can monitor it and put it in those screens for the control room to be able to see it upstairs. And if I can move this to the side a little bit more, this is the newsroom downstairs. Pretty empty right now, like the rest of our worlds that everyone is working remotely. This is the producer pod alone. We have 16 different desks for producers for a 24-hour news operation. The reporters all sit over here in the back corner. This is our assignment desk. They monitor all of the calls, all of the emails, help us set up stories. They are there 24/7. And I just had to throw in one more. We're pretty good at what we do. So this is what we've won in just the last couple of years. And in fact, our little show we are nominated for 3 more Emmys at least this year, and those had just come out. So that's just a bit of a behind the scenes look at what it takes and the timeline for what it takes in order to get a newscast on the air.
Right. And the prior to all of the technology is all of the research and the writing, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Again, people think I come in at 4 or 4:30 to just get my hair and makeup. And I know there are some thoughts about how do we put a story together? Who decides what is quality news or what deserves to be in a newscast? There is a lot of thought that goes into that. And then we hit the ground running. If we don't have time to manufacture the way we want a story to look for any particular reason, if we had that kind of time, we'd be taking a bathroom break. We'd be taking a lunch break. I mean, we barely have time to think for ourselves that for the dayside ships in particular, they are in at 9 o'clock in the morning, starting to look at what stories are out there and contacting people they know. There's a 10 a.m. meeting with the managers to decide, okay, this is what viewers pay attention to. People like weather. Anytime we have big weather, that's why we go wall to wall and we lead with weather, because it affects everybody. Even if it isn't in the area where you live, people love to watch weather and dogs in weather. And then during the day, we have to hit all of our social media. We have to hit Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, KOMOnews.com, KOMO Radio, Univision is in our station as well. We try to give them information, KVI Radio. And then there's the afternoon meeting to get an assessment of where are you with your story. Then you have to write the web copy. Then you actually have to produce the story that you've been working on all day. And remember, you're working on one story that you have to break down into your best 90 seconds at most. That's what you get, 1:30 to put this entire story together. And in some instances, pretty much, pretty often you're doing it 2 or 3 different times for different newscasts. For the afternoon shows, you're working for a 3:30, a 4, a 5, a 6, and reworking it for an 11 p.m. And then we're back in the morning at 4:30 in the morning. So we use those constant threads all day long for how we're developing a story. It's just you get on the train and you keep going. But we always have to remember, people have an agenda for talking to us and people have an agenda for not talking to us. And I think that's a real critical point is to make for why it's important to see a story come together, not just for the headlines, but for the final product, to give us as journalists an opportunity to explain what we do have and what we don't have and why we do have it and why we don't have it.
Right, right. Because so one of the questions on my list is, and as an English teacher, of course, I keep gravitating to that one question: how do you use reading, writing, and communication skills in your job? Which, of course, we could spend the rest of the day on. There's interviewing that has to happen. And right. So, I mean, how you work that in, there's the interviewing and then the writing and then the editing. It sounds to me like, I'm thinking of my writing students who might be listening. You do a lot of revision, and it's almost constant. And because you get new information in and you've got to fold that in. And so you got to cut something out, and you're constantly in revision mode, aren't you? As far as the writing part of it goes.
The social media part of it has actually given us an extra platform to put our full interviews on a platform, instead of feeling like, I hate to say what the saying is, it's kill the babies, because you have all of these wonderful sound bites and so much information that you want to put into a story and you just can't fit it in. And so we've had, you have people who watch a story that you've done with them and they say, well, why did you leave all of this out? And we say, well, in a half-hour newscast, there's only 9.5 minutes of news. And we have everybody else saying the same thing. But the social media part of it has given us an opportunity to put all of that raw video out there when we can and say, if you want more information, here's where you can go and find it, because we have done the work. We just haven't put it in this particular format because television news isn't the only medium that we're working in. anymore. We have to be cognizant that we're working on all of these different platforms. So it's not that we're always first, or we're always looking different than the other stations. You can probably think that a lot of us look pretty homogenized, that we're covering news, and you think, what's the difference one news station to the next? Well, it's the personalities of the people. It should be who you are trusting, and how we are presenting it. But across the board, we're not coming at it with any kind of agenda. There's so much information for a story itself on how or to cover, that we really don't have a time to kind of manufacture it in any way. Some news organizations might choose to take what we call the low hanging fruit, a little bit more than others. The if it bleeds, it leads kind of concept. Let's go to the crashes. Let's go to, the crime scenes, and others will say, well, let's do more of the in-depth reporting and things that focus more on what families would watch, what would mothers watch, what would, the 20 to 45-year-olds watch. It's all a mix of demographics, but it doesn't change what the content actually is and what people tell us. But yeah, I wouldn't say there are revisions necessarily during the day to our stories themselves, because for the most part, we wait until the very last minute, to the fear of our photographers, to write our stories as late as we can. If we have a newscast at 5, I'm writing a story between between probably 3 and 4. Maybe I give myself an hour at most to log all my video and in interviews, but then my photographer needs a full hour to edit. If it's a minute and a half piece, you need about an hour to edit every minute worth of news. They're fast. I don't know how they go as quickly as they do, because now they can probably get them done in about 20 to 30 minutes. And then we have to feed it in, and we all, love technology and how much simpler it's made our lives, right? Nothing ever goes wrong. A feed never goes down. You never have a bad connection. And we're always on I-5 or in a major metropolitan area with 5G, right? Right? Not even 20% of the time. You have to build in a buffer to be able to get your content to the station, so they can actually run it and roll it. And you have to build in all of these things that just eat away at your day and at your time. So you have to just try and be as efficient as possible.
Yeah. You said something about, you referred to social media in a positive way, and so I kind of want to loop back to that. You mean there's something good about social media?
The feed, it's interesting. We have always, I think I come to social media with the idea that I'm never going to change somebody's mind on social media by engaging on social media. So I'm probably not the one to say I've got 10,000 followers. I've only got 2,500 on, Twitter. I'm one of the smaller ones, but I put the information out there. And I think I'm coming around to the idea that there is more value than vice, with it. But I think that really, as we've been seeing, depends on the individual viewer, and you have to have some responsibility on your own part to accept where you're getting your news sources from, and what that says about you. And if you are opening yourselves up to other ways of thinking and balancing it out that way, we're not the police. We're not the ones to tell you how to interpret what you are seeing. But if you're leaving that up to the comment sections to tell you what to believe based on what you're seeing from a newscast. I mean, we see some pretty hateful stuff sometimes, and we're like, that wasn't even our story. That wasn't even us. We get yelled at in the field for being King 4, and that's not even a station. And there are misconceptions all the time about why we cover a story one way versus another. We went to a rally for a woman who was unfortunately killed during a protest on I-5, and she had been hit by a vehicle, and we were simply covering a memorial for her. It seems pretty benign, and it would seem like the group would want any kind of coverage possible. But our station, they were mad about a different story that I didn't do. But it was about a police officer who was accused of, I think, hitting someone with their car. Not anything that became a story. I know we've heard similar things that have become investigations, but this was still in a very early investigative phase. And our policy as a station is not to name anybody until they are arrested. And the group was upset with us because we were not naming this cop because of what their viewpoints are towards policing. And they wanted us to leave this memorial. But it was just a memorial. And of course we respected that. But as we were leaving, we were hearing them on the loudspeaker saying things about KOMO. Other stations don't have the same policy of not waiting until an arrest to name a suspect. And another station did name this cop. And so this group felt more comfortable with another news organization because of what their policy was, not understanding that we weren't, trying to manufacture a situation. We were just following what we have as the blanket rule for everybody. And they felt like we were making the rules up as we go along. And if I could dissuade people from believing that, or what we post on social media, usually are just updates as the day goes on, that things do change.
Sure.
You have to take all of it in and not just get your news from the headlines. It's not enough. It's not, I've seen other organizations try to do 40 stories in the first 11 minutes. You do the math, that's about less than 20 seconds a story. What are you going to get from that? And you have to take the personal responsibility to find more information, because it's out there. There are plenty of ways to find out instead of just the bullet points.
Didn't you mention when we were speaking earlier that that you had to have security, because there is, unfortunately, in our country right now, there's this banner media. Everybody, there's this huge sense of evil around the concept of media, which is fascinating to me, because media is a gigantic word.
Yeah.
Which encompasses way more than journalism, way more than broadcasting, way more than news. Media is way too big a word, but people will just blanket media. Well, you can't trust the media. Well, who is that? Who is the media? Right?
Well, I mean, you remember me as a high school student. I don't think my standards for how I'm living have changed that much. It's heartbreaking in a way, because I think the best journalists get into this career because we really care about storytelling and a sense of community responsibility. And the safety element of it, where to begin on that? Yeah, it's been a different world for the last couple of years. My company is Sinclair and Broadcasting, and it is known as a conservative company nationwide. It's gotten a lot of bad press for buying up a lot of stations. On the local level, I will say we're known as the Rebel Star, that we are who we are. And I'll just remind people, we were owned by Fisher, a local family, for decades. And the same people who worked for Fisher are the same people who are still working for Sinclair. Our writing style hasn't changed. Who we are hasn't changed. Our paycheck has changed from the source of where it's coming from. We are not told, how to do a story. The security element of it is scary, that I go out on stories and suddenly I am the bullseye. I'm the focus. We have had photographers and reporters who can't get out of their cars because people are banging on the vehicles. I kind of compare it to, I was an art history major in college, and if you look at art from, I know this is going to be a little abstract, but if you look at art, pre-18th century, it was all about the subject matter. It wasn't the artist. It was all about the subject matter, and the hand of the artist was as invisible as possible. And then after that, you've got pointillism, abstract, cubism, you've got impressionism, and you've got Pollock, and you've got Rothko, and now the artist is seen. And I feel journalism is the same way. When I got into it, it was about the content and the story, and I wasn't supposed to be seen. I'm not a big part of it. I don't get my nails done. I haven't had my roots done in like 2 months. I'm a terrible on-air person, because the on-air presence part of it and being on television is the last thing I think about. And I'm a little disappointed for how much we have become the story, and that's what people tend to talk about more than what the content is of what we're actually covering and dividing lines between who we are as people. I mean, we are still, we live in these communities. We have families, you know, we are reporting on people we know, on our neighbors in our neighborhoods.
Mhm.
It,
Yeah.
it's amazing how I don't like being called enemy number one. I'm, you know, I'm not an enemy of anybody. And for my husband to feel like he has to be my security sometimes because he's an ex-Green Beret, it's tough for my mom to watch my stories and worry when I'm in Olympia.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I want to come back around in a couple of minutes to this business of really clarifying the difference in reporting and commentating, because I think
Mhm.
that's where some of the problem exists. But we've got a question by one of our viewers. When you're on the air, do you ever have to think on the spot? And if so, what is that like? What is that like?
You know, if I can show you, it's experience. It's like driving. You know, I think driving is the one thing that I'm actually really good at because I've had to do it now for what, oh gosh, 25 years almost. Languages, you know, I still can't speak French fluently, even though I should at this point with all of my studies. But you do driving all the time, and I feel like um, speaking live is kind of the same thing that I have had to do. Okay, let me go back to this, and I'm going to go to the share screen, and it looks like it's still okay. I wish it would go to my, okay, it's not going to go to my desktop.
So the share screen did not go on.
Okay. Well, normally it would be on the
There it is.
photos here.
It
If
is.
I close out of this, can you see my desktop?
No, we still see the same,
The photo?
uh, the photos. The
Yeah,
photo.
okay. Then I'm just going to bring it back up. I had some examples on my desktop. I didn't think to pull them up um into my photos, but it was just an example of one story where I had to think on the cuff. We had a massive marina on fire.
Oh,
And we had to talk about all the boats burning down, and literally you just start talking until someone tells you in your ear, please shut up. You know, we have to go on to something else, and I'm okay with that. But we had an instance where, and you might remember the story, that we had a passenger train derail and land on
yeah.
I-5. We were covering a different story at the time. We were sent to it, and it's literally, if you need to speak, you need to just simply describe what's in front of you, and that's all it is. That you're not coming up and talking like you are to one of your girlfriends, but you are just talking as if you are to someone and saying, oh my gosh, this is what I'm seeing right in front of me. Just hit the who, what, when, where, why of what you know. And suddenly, you know, time flies by if you are just describing what's in front of you. It's like talking now. I'm drawing a blank, but words are coming out of my mouth, you know. That you just you get into this realm of just being able to speak and describe about what's in front of you. Because if you try to get any more complex than that, you're going to get in the weeds.
Yeah.
And you're gonna go down a path that you might not want to go. If you have some information you can quickly find on your phone about stats, you know, we were on snow coverage this last week, and I could see how many county roads there are to plow in Snohomish County, and I can refer to that. It adds a little bit more to it, and thankfully your phone, you know, gives you a lot of information that you can use from sources you trust.
Yeah, and that automatic in your brain, who, what, when, where, how, it is automatic for you, Lee. It isn't automatic for everyone, and I think that's a great segue. That's a great point to make. That's the difference in reporting and commentating. Reporting isn't opinion. It isn't agenda. It is literally the who, what, why, and how.
Yeah.
And there's a huge difference in reporting and commentating. I'm sure you would agree. I think some of the angst and some of the anger toward the media is really about commentators. It's really about opinion pieces. It isn't about reporting, but people don't seem to know the difference. And how do we get through? How do we fix that, do you suppose?
You know,
Where's our way through?
I think there was the worst thing, and universally we can say the worst thing that ever happened to journalism is it became a for-profit business. And many may not know that it switched over, was 60s or 70s or so, that the network started saying, okay, let's start pumping stuff into our newscasts. And running a newscast is cheaper than running a syndicated television show when you think about the salaries they're getting versus, the salaries that I was getting in Montana. I was making $15,000 a year with a Northwestern education. My parents were very understanding for that first year. A gallon of milk and a gallon of gas costs almost the same no matter where you are. So I have a lot of sympathy for when they're saying, oh, well, salaries wherever you live are based on where you live. Not necessarily. But that really changed the business. It turned it into a business. And that's why you're seeing newscasts on a local level expand more and more and more and more. When I started, we had a 5 o'clock and a 6 o'clock newscast. And now we have a 3:30 and a 4, and we started 4:30 in the morning, not 5. The networks want to run more and more news because their advertisers love advertising during local newscasts. They know that's when most of their local viewers are watching. And your local newscasts are not commentary. This is the newscast. There's a huge difference, and hopefully people are seeing that between national news coverage and the value of local news. We're not boring. We're not always going to do the what bleeds it leads, but we're going to give you information. And it's on the viewer to take the responsibility for what's important to them to watch. But the commentary, that's part of the news now being a 24-hour business. And they are filling those hours with mostly commentators. The newscasts themselves, when we're on a local level. On the national level, I know when the evening broadcasts are on, and I know what the morning shows look like. But besides that, during the day, outside those windows, most of it is commentary.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just now realizing, because we're about out of time, I'm just now realizing I failed to ask some key questions like, what's the salary like in your job, and the whole career path, because I'm thinking about these other issues that are close to my heart about information. So information and my students processing the barrage that's coming at them all the time. I was supposed to ask you about all those sorts of things, salary and whatnot. So
I can squeeze in whatever you want. I can tell you it's wide range. Like starting salaries in some markets, again, when I was there, was $15,000 a year, and thankfully I'm not earning that much right now. The salaries on the top end of it, I know anchors used to make, even on the local level, pretty good salaries with town cars and makeup and hair and clothing allowances. All of that is gone. Because there are so many platforms, local news is not pulling in the numbers that we used to pull in terms of ratings and shares. We're still doing really good, but those numbers are down, and so many people want to be part of the industry that the salaries have gone down a lot, or they haven't kept up with inflation to the point that we're on par with Amazon. If you want to put it that way, we're not pulling in the big bucks. We're not buying the waterfront homes on reporter salaries. We do this, again, it's not about being on television. These days, anybody can be on television. Anybody can find a screen to be on. This business is no longer about that. You really get into it because you like storytelling.
Yeah.
Great to listen to you. You had a lot of great information, and I want to thank you very much.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'll come back anytime. And if you want it, watch KOMO, great, but if you want to find me, my email's out there and my Twitter is out there as well if anybody has questions.